Welcome everyone! The reason famous games are famous is often because they're either very exciting, extremely well played, or because they're super instructive, and today's game certainly is all three of these. In this game from the 1967 Interzonal Tournament in Sousse, Bobby Fischer played a Mongolian master called Myagmarsuren, and not only is it a very instructive game in the King's Indian attack, there's also a very nice checkmating attack with a queen sacrifice. So let's just get right into it. Fischer had white and opened with e4, e6, so we could see a French defense, but instead of the normal d2, d4, Fischer played d3. He doesn't want to go into a French today, as mentioned, he's going for a King's Indian attack. Fischer actually played this system a lot. White just goes g3, bishop g2, and he puts his knights on d2 and f3. That's not meant to blow black off the board right out of the opening. You just get a sensible structure and decent pieces and you take it from there. But of course, Fischer also had enormous experience playing King's Indian structures as black, so it makes sense he also felt comfortable with the white setup. Black played d5, knight to d2, knight f6, g3. Fischer's just playing the routine moves. Meanwhile, black's claiming some more space with c5. If white doesn't want any space, then he might as well get some. Bishop g2, knight c6, knight from g to f3. Bishop e7, all standard development. And after both sides castled, Fischer played e5. Also a standard move, white simply gains space and chases the knight away from his defensive duty on the king side. Now the h7 pawn in particular lacks defense, but also the g4 and h5 squares are available to white now, and you'll see that Fischer will take full advantage of that. However, first of all he needs to defend the e-pawn, so rook e1, b5, black's taking even more space, and then he wants to follow up with a5, b4, a4 and a3, and eventually break through on the queen side. Bishop a6 is also often played, and the queen may also get involved. Meanwhile, white will start an offensive on the king side, so basically both sides race and see who gets to the enemy king first. It continued knight to f1. After h4, maybe the knight will go to h2 and g4, maybe to e3, depends. Black continued b4, but now it's Fischer's turn to start his kingside play. Now a knight will likely land on g5 at some point, and as mentioned, knight from h2 to g4 is also common. Black just continued his plan on the queen side. Bishop f4, but after a4, at this point Fischer apparently had the longest think of the game, and finally he settled on a3, which wasn't only a new move at the time, it's also the best move according to Stockfish, and it's been the most played move ever since. Basically, Fischer prevents black's counterplay by making sure black cannot play a3 himself. If instead knight from 1 to h2 would be played, which Fischer did play previously, then after a3 black undermines the dark squares, and you can imagine black maybe using the c3 or b2 square at some point for a knight, or a plan with bishop to a6 and playing for c5, c4. Going back to the game, after a3 none of that is going to happen. It continued pawn takes, and after the recapture, knight to a5 was played. I'm actually not really sure what black had in mind. Maybe rook to b8 was also logical, at least making use of the now open b file. And if now let's say knight to e3, go knight to d4, and if white trades that off, then knight goes to g4, then the rook can land on b2, and at the very least it will be harder for white to get his kingside play going. Anyway, knight to a5 was black's choice, and here Fischer played a provocative move. He went knight to e3, that's provoking the move d5, d4, which will free up the e4 square for white's pieces. By the way, black shouldn't go for the casual queen to c7, which looks like a reasonable move at first, but white has a couple of strong moves now. But a typical sacrifice in these King's Indian attack structures is knight takes d5, and after pawn takes, e6 wins the piece back, and after bishop d6, e d7, bishop d7, and knight to e5, white has a very pleasant game. Going back, black didn't play d4 right away. Bishop to a6 was played first, and after bishop to h3, which stops any f6 or f5 ideas, black did go for d4, And after knight to f1, you can see that the knight can now maneuver to the e4 square, which is a very nice square for the knight. Fischer's plan also had a downside though. After knight to b6, the black knight has access to the d5 square now. But as Fischer once said, you've got to give squares to get squares. And white still stands better either way, especially after knight to g5. Again a provocative move. h6 would be a nice weakening move for white. And of course black also has to watch out for queen to h5 at some point. Black wasn't provoked by the knight right now. He moved his own knight in the center of the board, which also attacks the bishop, therefore bishop d2. Now again, black shouldn't go for a lazy move like h6 now, because there's again a classic sacrifice. Knight takes e6, and now you'll also see the power of the bishop on h3, because after pawn takes, e6 hangs with check, and after king to h8, white can first deflect the queen with bishop takes a5, and after queen takes, take on d5, winning the piece back, and white simply 2 pawns up and completely winning. Black knew that. He eliminated that dangerous knight with bishop takes g5. The bishop recaptured, attacking the queen, which went to d7, and now Fischer switches to attack mode with queen to h5. Now a common general advice is to counter an attack on the flank by striking in the center, and in this case black would indeed have decent play after c4, and if then pawn takes, knight takes, and then black can go for d3 and d2, black isn't completely out of the woods there either, but the game continuation definitely wasn't better. Black played rook from f to c8, and now watch how Fischer makes progress. First knight to d2, the knight is now heading to the e4 square. Black also seeks to improve the knight, but this allowed a nice bishop move. Bishop to f6, that's a fun move to play. Let's see what would happen if black takes that. Now this is a very cool variation. After the recapture, white threatens with queen g5 check and a quick checkmate. So king to h8, now the rook could move over to g8 if needed. But now white has a second bishop sack, bishop to f5, another checkmate threat, and this time black has to take. But then the rook infiltrates on e7, and after queen d8, rook takes f7, the queen has to come over. But then there is rook to g7, and black has to give up the queen to not get checkmated, and white's clearly winning. Very cool, but of course black knew better than to take that. He brought the queen over to defend. But the threats kept coming in with knight to e4. Now if allowed, black would go bishop takes g7 next, and after king takes, queen g5 check and knight to f6. It's very hard to suggest moves for black. In the game g6 was tried, and we all understand that move, but the dark squares are very weak now. Now the queen stayed near the black king, staring at the monarch from g5. Black has a losing position now. Knight takes e4 was played, which also brings a rook into the attack, but black really doesn't have anything better. If, for example, rook from c to b8 was played, hoping to infiltrate and counterattack, then one way to continue could be knight to d6, and when the queen ducks to f8, just advance the h-pawn. Black doesn't have any time for play of his own. If now rook to b2, then after this pawn trade, white just breaks through with brute force after bishop takes e6, and checkmate isn't far away. Going back, knight takes e4 was played, rook takes, but black wasn't ready to give up yet. He went c4, but Fischer could simply use the h-pawn to soften up black's kingside, and after cd3, bring the rook over, and now check out this nice finish. After rook to a7, bishop to g2 is setting up an awesome checkmate. Black still took on c2, but now queen to h6. Black thought he's going for queen g7 mate, so queen to f8, but that wasn't the plan at all. Here's the brutal finish. Queen takes h7 check, and black resigned. Now you'll see the purpose of that bishop g2 move, because after king takes, pawn takes g6 and king takes, then the bishop lands on e4 with a neat checkmate. Just an awesome game, and also interesting to see how that opening novelty by Fischer going a3 to stop black's plan on the queen side is still the main move today. If you're interested in playing the King's Indian attack, you should definitely check out Fischer's games. He knew it inside and out, you'll learn a lot, and they're also great fun. Let me know in the comments what you think of this game. If you liked this game recap, you'd really help me out by simply leaving a like to the video, it's that simple. And do consider subscribing to the channel. Check in tomorrow for another great game. I'll be seeing you guys again soon, and take care.